Fireside. October is upon us, and it's not long till Halloween. Already, autumn has begun to grip the countryside. Walk with me for a moment. As we climb a rocky knoll and look upon the land below, a crimson sunset stains the land in rich vermilion hues as the cold breeze blows from the north. The trees just ablaze in autumn's glory as it looks like a wildfire that rose the hillsides within view. Even as the shadows stretch out their snake-like tendrils to grasp the lands in their icy, cold, and clammy embrace. You can feel the change in the air. As the shadows stretch out and coat the land in a rich shade of ebony, and shadows and silhouettes take the dominance of the countryside, and the shadows swell, robbing the light from view. You might hear the screams, or the moans, or the ghastly sounds of things coming to wake in the night. Soon the sun will set, dipping far below the western horizon, and twilight will set upon the land. With it, its creatures shall come out and revel in the night. Yes, October is indeed upon us. And all the glory, and the splendor, and the wonder, and the eeriness of autumn has arrived. Glad to see everyone back again. I'm wrfrady. Tonight's episode, I have a special treat, but we'll get to that in a moment. First, I'd like to offer, if you've enjoyed these stories that I've been sharing each and every Friday since September, and will be until time for Halloween, feel free to join me. Also, feel free to go back. Feel free to go back and make sure that you watch the earlier episodes. That way you can also enjoy more of the stories. Be sure to go by and check out the Evanstonetower.com, the home of all things wrfrady. There you'll find Whispery Hollow in the Lovelady Township. You'll find Legends of Lacy Road, the Wise Oak, home of Ballador, and, well, the Evanstone Tower itself. Be sure to stop in and check out Wolf Moon Studios. There will be featured artists, my own art as well. I also will be featuring many of the other projects that are going on, and featured artists, musicians, and good friends. Also, I would like to say, be sure to check in to the Cantankerous Cauldron. You should never know what just might be cooking in the mind of wrfrady and what's coming into the future. So again, be sure to stop in and check out the evanstonetower.com. The home site for all things wrfrady. I'd like to give a few shout outs tonight. Some of my cosplay friends and family who seem to just jump on with me all of a sudden. I hope you're doing well. Hakashin. Tell everyone I said hey. It's good to see you on. I'd also like to give a shout out to my good friend Chad of Moonrunner 83. And he's got a new single coming out around the 21st. So be sure to check that. Also, keep an eye out for Stroh's Sinister Cinema, a delightfully fun horror show, which hopefully will be streaming by Halloween on your local streaming services. Filmed in the tradition of Mystery Science Theater and Classic Elvira, where they would host a movie, and the events of the movie would also affect how the episode played out. The Stroh's Sinister Cinema promises to be great fun. You can find more out about that on the Be Your Own Hero Productions page, on Facebook, Instagram, soon on TikTok, and a few other services which I'll announce as they come up. If you're at one of the local cons, Charlotte Comic Con in December, be sure to stop in and say hey. Or if you're attending the Carolina Renaissance Festival on Time Travelers Weekend, come to the Be Your Own Hero area and stop in and say hey to everyone. Be good to see you. I'll be working there with the Be Your Own Hero Productions. Now, that being said, let's get into tonight's first story. Tonight's first story takes us into the fantasy Catawba Valley of Whispery Hollow in the Lovelady Township. All right. There's an old, abandoned Victorian mansion that set just on the outskirts of Rockhaven. And according to local legends, it was very much haunted and hosted a ghastly of most grisly characters. Well, every night it was said that that character Jonathan Parsons would rise from the grave, and all of his pieces would assemble in that house, and he would live once more throughout the night. However, being as young boys are, sometimes you just have to find out things for yourself. It was said that anyone who moved into the old estate would stay there much longer than a night or two, and they would be gone. Packed up, moved away as quickly as their wills could carry them. Well, Paul didn't believe this. Paul did not... excuse me, please. Paul was the skeptic. And he was more than vocal about being a skeptic. Despite when his friends were gathered around the campfire and they were talking about the old house, the old mansion, which was just beyond the trees, and you could see the asymmetrical spires leering over them from the distance above the treetops. Oh, it's all nonsense, Paul would say. Okay, Mr. Know-It-All, since you think you know everything, why don't you go stay for the night? Paul sat there as like he had already he had already bashed and tried to speak away and explain away and said, it all has an explanation. And there's people are just hearing things, and he veritably talked himself into a corner. So finally his friend said, okay, Mr. Know-It-All, since you seem to know everything, go stay there the night, this Friday. Well, Paul had already gotten himself into a pickle. He knew that should he refuse and back out, he wouldn't be able to face his friends, for they would give him a hard time about it. Yet, if he did do it, what if it was true? But then he decided, just letting it get to my head. So it was all agreed. That Friday night, they were going to stay at Fred's house so that they could see the old mansion. And it was agreed that he would go and he would stay the night there, and so that they would know that he was indeed in the house. He would have to go to one of the fireplaces and light a fire and keep it going all night so that they could see the smoke rising from the chimney and know that he had not backed out of their bargain. So, Friday rolled around, and Paul was off, met by his friends, and taken up to the gate of the old Parsons Manor. He could see the dilapidated looking structure, asymmetrical Victorian structure, glaring at him from its place beyond a makeshift forest of rheumatic, gnarled trees that just gave an almost sinister look to the whole. And as he made his way closer and closer to the old house, a crow solitary and alone, screeched out in its raspy voice as if trying to warn him to stay away. But it was all set. He found himself on the steps of the old mansion, looking up at the old estate. And after searching a while, he found the door. To his dismay, the door was unlocked. So he pushed it open and went inside, coughing from the dust and stuff that stirred up from the air that rushed past him, for the house had not been opened in many a year. And as such it showed. For no matter where he looked, a thick coat of dust seemed to cover everything. Apparently, from what he could tell, the last 10 owners of the house had not only left, but left rather quickly, for they had only taken the time to get their own private personal things to leave. For it seemed that the house might be fully furnished, for as he looked into one of the parlors, he could see the ghastly figures and apparitions of furniture which had been covered in white linens and neatly painted and a fine coat of dust. In the distance, he could hear thunder roll, and the clouds were rolling in for the night. He knew it was going to be a long night, because when it would storm in the area, the storms usually settled in for a long part of the evening, and the telltale rumble of thunder let him know that he was in for such an evening. The wind had already begun to stir, and a sweeping phantom of dust passed him by through the hallway and out the doorway, to be carried off by the breeze as it was beginning to the storm was beginning to gather. Paul continued on, and he knew he had to find a fireplace. And sure enough, on the other side of the linen-coated furniture was a great fireplace, perfect for him to be able to start a fire. He turned around and looked back, and he had not only noticed that the stairs that ascended to the second floor, which is by the door, but also that there was an old bureau set against it. And he went over there, and opening it up, he found a candlestick, and with a little chain, with a little ring that he could carry it in, and a globe which would keep the wind from blowing out a candle. So as he went through that, he wondered and fumbled through drawers until he found a candle and put it in, and then found something and he found the matches in an old tinder box, and lit a candle and began to search through the house to find the wood he would need to start and maintain a fire for the night, so that his friends over in Fred's house would see the smoke and know that he's there. It wasn't long till he found some old boxes and a little bit of wood out on the porch, on the far side where he hadn't come, on the opposite side of where he had come to get to enter the house. And before long, he had a blazing, warm fire going, and the stark orange glow that radiated from the fire was a complete contrast to the ethereal glow which filtered in through the windows and gave almost a surreal look to the whole, as if to wake him from his gadabout with his eyes. A sharp wind grabbed the door and slammed it to, making him nearly jump out of his skin. But then he kind of chuckled at himself for his own carelessness at leaving the door open. And so it was for a while. All was quiet, and everything was fine. Then he decided, well, I've got the fire on. I've got the fire going that they can see it. I'm going to explore a bit. And so he began to search room to room to see what he could find, including finding more wood to be able to keep the fire going, because he still had to keep it up for the night. He went into one room and felt his breath catching his throat as a pair of beady eyes watched him from the darkest recess of the large den. And something about it just leered at him with a malice that just pierced him to his soul. And as he took the chamber stick and moved closer to where it would get into the light where he could see what it was he was looking at, he found that it was the mounted head of an old mountain goat. But its look and the way that it had been mounted gave such an inhuman malice as to feel like he was being confronted by forbidden things. And the sooner he could get away from that goat, the better. And he got back and made his way out of that room, and it was almost as instantly he felt relief as he cleared away. And he continued to search, and as he went through, he thought he heard voices. He knew he was alone at home, but he could hear voices talking on the distance, and they were talking in a low mumble, and he couldn't really make out what they were saying, but he could tell that they were speaking. Maybe they were talking about him. Maybe they knew somebody was there and knew he was in their home. Odd, but you'd think they'd clean up a little bit with the dust. But no, he heard the voices. So he continued to follow the voices, and he could hear them just in the room beyond the door as it came to a T-junction, just on the other side. Hello, is anyone there? And the voices paused. And after a moment, the voices continued again. So he began to find that he couldn't get in that one, for that door was locked. So he moved around. And then it dawned on him, maybe it's just Chad and the other guys playing a trick on me. Guys, are you in there? And he knocked on the door. And the voices paused. And he listened. And then they continued on again. But then he realized the voices were fading. And so as he went to make his way back through, he started trying the doors and checking them out. And he opened one door and found himself face to face with this just empty black chasm of a space. and his light barely touched on the steps leading down to the basement, and something, as he stood there, his very hair stood on end, and just that feeling in the pit of his stomach that something was just entirely wrong. And as he reached out, he pushed the door to, and felt almost as if something was about to grab him and drag him into the darkness, and was quite thankful that he didn't, and was even more thankful once that basement door was closed. And he continued on, and he opened up another door and felt a familiar feeling of revulsion. And he looked up to see that he had entered another angle of that den, and the goat face was what seemed to be leering at him once more. And just as quickly as he opened the door, he closed it and was back out into the hallway, where he went back to the fireplace and decided to settle in for a while. By that time, the fire was going fairly decently, and so he put on some more wood to keep everything going solid and smooth, and then decided to go ahead and start digging out the jar of soup and stuff that he had brought from home, so that he could go ahead, that he could eat. Lightning flashed outside, and the thunder rumbled and shook the house. The storm had moved in rather quick. Or perhaps he just hadn't been paying attention while he was exploring and getting the fire ready. And the winds had picked up, and he could hear the wind hissing as it circled the house with a whistle as it hit little alcoves and things, and the sound of it just added to the eerie ambiance of his surroundings. Before long, a raging torrent just opened up, and it was pouring outside. With the moisture and the chill that had begun to creep in from the rain and the storm, he was thankful to have the fire at his disposal to keep him warm, and figured that he would be best off to stay right there for the night. He was good with that, for he had seen pretty much all of the house he had wanted to see, especially with the goat's head and the door and the basement door. As the storm began to roll, and as his food was getting warmer and warmer, and he was ready to eat, a strange sound played upon his ears. Was it what he thought it was? Did he hear music in this empty old house? I mean, surely it wouldn't be as crazy as hearing the voices earlier. But sure enough, he listened, and it got a little louder, and he could hear the music in the distance. And it was an old sound, and he could hear the sound, and it was continuing to play. He looked out. Hello? Is anyone up there? No answer. But the music continued. got his jar of soup and set it aside so that it wouldn't boil over, and decided it was time to wait. It would wait. He wanted to know where the song was coming from. And so, once again, he set out exploring the house with the chamber stick in hand and a rich golden glow bouncing, emanating from the candle to light the way. And as he drew near the steps, he could tell that the music was filtering down the steps. So, he decided to gather his courage and strength. He's like, what have I got to worry about? I've come this far. And so he went up the steps, little by little. And as he got closer to the top, the shadows seemed to close in about him. And only the meager light of that candle kept the opaque shadows from completely engulfing him. The music was louder here, and he followed it down a hallway. Ethereal light filtered in through the windows and cast a very, very twilight glow over the area, and even radiated through the cobwebs which lined the way. And it really just gave the whole scene before him this feeling as one would get when entering that darkened place in a nightmare that you just shouldn't go, but your dream is compelling you to go that way. And so the light before him, he walked down the hall, almost jumping out of his skin when his foot hit a creaky board in the floor, and also ground his teeth once he got himself back together, because as loud as that was, there was no way whoever was in the distance didn't hear him. So but then it was dark. And so he continued on down, and he tried the doors until he came to one that was open. And it was a great suite of a bedroom with a grand fireplace, and it was rather comfortable looking. And it had a few wall sconces to where he could light more candles. And that was also the same room, whence in the corner a cylindrical phonograph sat, it just having finished turning and finishing the song that had been playing. As he scoped it around, he decided maybe, with the way this room is as comfortable as looking as it is, it has a nice bed, has the fireplace, window overlooking the woods. He decided to gather his things and start a fire up there in that fireplace as well. And before long, he had his things up there and had warmed his soup. And after eating, he put more wood on there, and the warmth washed over him. And so he decided to go on and lay down for a little bit and get a small nap. And so he crawled up beside the fire and started to drift off. He woke up a little while later as the fire had begun to die down and the chill had crept back into the room and had kind of started to make him feel like, ooh, it was cold and kind of chilly and uncomfortable, and he was stirred to and noticed that the fire was low and decided to go ahead and start building it up again. And he got going and then saw that he needed to get more wood, so he went downstairs and he got the wood he needed from the fireplace. However, if he had looked just off the side of the porch as he was getting in the firewood, he might have seen something that would have made him completely forget about the rest of the dare and go on home for the night. And even wait till morning to come back and get his things. But he didn't look. And so he gathered the wood he needed and went back upstairs and set to work. Got the fire going again. And as he sat back and relaxed, he noticed something peculiar out of the corner of his eye. That in the window was a face leering at him. And he stopped for a minute and he kind of looked out of the corner of his eye. And then when he went to turn, it wasn't there. And it just, something about it unnerved him. He knew what he had seen out of the corner of his eye in the window. It was a head of a man that was just leering at him, just with a look of sheer hatred. Anyway, and so, not knowing what to do, he sat back and he put the wood in and he got comfortable and he started once more to drift off. And he is awakened by the sound of something climbing the steps. And he was taken aback because he knew he was there by himself. Only now he knew he wasn't. Because as he looked to the door, he could see an arm reach in front of the door and pull, and another one reach, grab the piece of the floor and pull. And you could see the bloody stumps of the fingers of where it had been pulling itself along the whole way. And as he looked, the torso of a person, headless and legless, drug itself around the corner. And Paul sat back and he didn't know what to do because it was right there and that was the only way he had to get out. And he turned and he looked at the window and there it was. That face that was looking at him with demonic glee. Just watching him. And it soon looked around and began, and a pair of legs come hopping up the stairs behind it. And they assembled themselves to the torso. And the torso stood. It was a rotten, worm-eaten corpse of a torso that was still disfigured and gangly as it was not put together correctly. And it opened the window and the head rolled in. And Paul was stumbling around the room trying to stay as far as he could away from it. And then the head come tumbling in and fell at his feet and began to snap at his feet and cackling with the laughter of a madman. And Paul was just taken, he didn't know what to think. He couldn't move. The thing was snapping at his feet at one side, and the torso was walking toward him the other. And then it reached down, and it grabbed its head and put it in place. And Jacob Parsons was whole again. And as he reached to grab hold of Paul, Paul tore past him and tried to run down the stairs and was met by the fury of the wind and then trying to shut the door and keep it from doing it. And he found a way to get through and finally ran out screaming into the night. So, weeks passed, and no one ever heard from Paul. No one knows what happened to him that night in Parsons Manor. And when they did find him, all they could hear him babbling about that they could find coherent in his gibberish was how a dismembered body, put itself together before his very eyes and reached for him and came to and tried to take him. If you liked this adaptation of The Haunting of Parsons Manor, go to evanstonetower.com, theevanstonetower.com. Go to the Whispery Hollow page. And on the Whispery Hollow page, click under The Haunting of Parsons Manor to read the story in full. Pardon me. Sometimes in the twilight, there are other beings, that like to come out, and there they have their sway. This tale also comes from the place known as Whispery Hollow. It's called Dark Embrace. Jelly walked down the roadway of Whispery Hollow, not really knowing how she got there. The wind blew past her with an icy bite, and had her nightgown streaming out behind her. The cobblestone paved road was cold beneath her feet as she made her way toward the center of town, not knowing why she felt compelled to go there. And the road took a slight curve. Night had long since fallen, and a silvery moon hung in the air coating the entire town in a fine silvery sheen, and illuminated her path along with the gaslit lampposts along the way. She found herself descending a hill going toward the center of town. And at the center of town was a great fountain. Old Gothic fountain that bore lions' heads and was kind of like a chimera of sorts of the classical mythology, which spewed water out of each of its heads. And she drew closer, and as she drew closer, she could see a dark, shadowy figure awaiting her as she approached. At first, she didn't recognize the figure, but she felt drawn to get closer. And so, almost as if not being able to control her body, she followed her compellation and came within a good eye shot of the fountain. And there she recognized the shadowy form as Jacob Barkley, an odd gentleman whom had introduced himself to her father many nights before. But what was he doing here at this time of night? The wind, as if to answer, hissed through her ears, robbing her of any sound other than its harsh comments as it passed through her hair. And as she approached, Jacob reached out his hand and took her hand into his and brought her to him. Jacob Barkley, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? He asked. I am he who called you here. What? No. I don't know. I was just out for a walk. I don't know. What? But I'm still trying to figure out how I got here. It's okay, he said. He drew her closer to where she could feel his breath. As I said, I summoned you here. So you're responsible for this? Oh, yeah. And if you know that I can do that, what else might I be able to do? And he smiled a wicked smile. Shelly shook her head. But my father... Oh, your father gave me permission to come by anytime I like. But I have claimed you, he said softly. And he pulled her tightly to him, took a deep breath as he smelled her perfume. And he lowered himself closer. Before it is done, you, Shelley, will be mine. And as he lowered his face closer to where she could feel his cold breath on her neck, she shuddered, and he pulled her more tightly, almost with a grip of a vice, and she found that she was unable to move in his grip. And as his lips roved over her neck, she felt the sharpened tips of what were they, his teeth, as they began to dent the skin of the flesh beneath her ear. And with a sharp gasp of breath, she felt the teeth plunge in with an icy, ecstatic pain in the side of her neck, and soon she felt like she was getting drunk and woozy, and the darkness started to slowly fall over her, and the last she saw was Jacob holding her tightly. Shelley woke. Whether it was minutes, hours later, she had no clue. But she woke in the dim shadows of her room. In the distance, Jacob was tending to the fire in her room and pushing back the shadows. "Rest well, my dear. You have had a long night." "But, my father..." "I told you before," he said. "Your father gave me permission to come by any time I like, and I will come by whenever I like. So, rest well, my dear. You've had a long night, and I don't want you weakened just yet." And he walked over, and he touched the marks on her neck where he had left his signature. "Yes," he said, "I will be back indeed." And as he made his way, he could see the light of dawn beginning to make its way over the eastern horizon. And so, with a quick bound, he was out the window. And the last she could see before blacking out once more was a bat, tiny, flying outward toward the old abode on the edge of town. Dark Embrace was another original story that was set in Whispery Hollow. It's one of the first official Whispery Hollow stories, along with The Long Walk Home. If you'd like to read that as well in its entirety, you can read it at Midnight Syndicate's Legions of the Night, which is where it had been first published. And also, you can read it at the Evanstone Tower, and you'll find that story there as well. So, with the first story being as long as it was, I think that we can wrap that one up here for the night. I've hoped you enjoyed going to Whispery Hollow with me. Whispery Hollow is an old town with restless spirits. It's got a history of strange things. Some based in legends, some based in stranger things. No pun intended. But there are many more legends from Whispery Hollow. many of which still have to be written, many of which are in the works. If you're interested in hearing more of Whispery Hollow, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed tonight. The sun has set on another October day. The shadows have robbed the color from the countryside, bathing it in 1,000 shades of ink-like darkness. You might hear the wind in the trees, or was it the hiss of something foul which had crawled out of its tomb? Be sure to sleep with a candle on tonight. Enjoy yourselves. Welcome to the official Halloween season. For me, Halloween season started in August. I hope everyone enjoys themselves. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you again for joining me by the Fireside. I would like to thank each and every one of you for making this possible. And if you would like to support the project of wrfrady's Friday night, I would like to get back to the wrfrady's Friday night frights, but the live ghost stories by the Fireside, and be prepared, be watching for Legends of Lacy Road Volume 1. It is in the works, but I should have it up hopefully by the end of this year. There's been many delays, just life getting in the way, and it happens, just minor setbacks. But if you want to support the project, especially I'm trying to raise the money to go to Romania for a writing and research trip. So if you want to support the project, go to ko-fi.com, buy me a cup of coffee. The link will be listed below. Also, it'll be in the Linktree account on my Instagram, which is Instagram at wrfrady. And I would appreciate it. You guys make it possible for me to get on here and tell these stories. This is my 3rd season running on doing this. And if at the rate it's going, we may be back for a 4th season. And that, of course, that'll be next year. And we still got to finish this season now. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the cool weather that's moving in. Pick up and read some ghost stories. Or go to your favorite audiobooks and find ghost stories there, or even on YouTube. Have fun. Enjoy this darker time of year. Make memories. There's a song that says it's the most wonderful time of the year. And it is. Alright, everyone. Thank you for being aboard. Thank you for joining me here at the Fireside. And perhaps, if things go well, perhaps I will see you again next week in a different location. More details to come. Till then, have a good weekend. See you in the shadows.